Hey everyone, I'm going to show you how I used Cuisenair rods with fractions when I taught third grade. I really liked Cuisenair rods, especially when we were first learning about fractions, because it took this abstract concept and made it very concrete. It was also great during the reasoning process and led to that sense making that we were looking for. So when I used Cuisenair rods, I had the students do several models that all would equal whatever the whole was. So in this case, this whole is 10 pieces. So these numbers are all divisible into 10. So once students understand the concept of what is a whole, it's an entire thing. It has no partitions. It's complete. The next fraction they're probably most familiar with, starting in about first grade, is a half. They're good at understanding how to half something, how to share something with a friend. It's an excellent reference point for students. If they can half something, they can really reason with bigger and smaller fractional pieces. So when I had Cuisenair rods, one of the very first things that I would want students to do is to be able to identify what the Cuisenair rods are representing. So for example, this is one whole piece. Moving up, you have 1/2 and 1/2. That's 2 halves, and 2 halves together would make that one whole piece. I always liked to relate it back to an addition sentence because students could see visually that it is one whole, but they needed a little more support reasoning with building the addition sentence, kind of decomposing the fraction model back into its constituent parts. So here, they would have 1/5 plus 1/5 plus 1/5 plus 1/5 plus 1/5 equals 5/5 or a whole, and the same for the top, tenths all the way up to one whole. So that's one way I like to use it for reasoning, and it was sense making for students. They understood how to label fractional pieces, how to create an addition sentence using fractional pieces, and relate the fractional pieces back to a whole. Once students were comfortable with that, what I liked for students to be able to do is both compare fractions and to an extent order. That's not quite the third grade standard, but we did look at ordering fractions. So the good thing about Cuisenair rods is if they all are divisible by the whole, or the whole is divisible by all these, they line up very pretty when they are equal. So for example, I could say, here I have 1/5. How many tenths are equivalent to 1/5? And so students can tangibly count, well, 1/10, 2/10 is equal to the portion we're talking about, that 1/5 portion. I think that's what really helped solidify the definition of equivalency for students, was for them to, tactilely do this, to touch a fifth and be able to finger touch and count the pieces that would correspond with that. And they can do that obviously several ways up. It's a little harder for students to see, but when you can have them relate it to the half, that makes it a little bit easier, especially when comparing numbers. So for example, if I wanted them to compare 3/10 and 1/2, well, the natural misconception that students will go towards is, well, 3/10, the numerator is bigger than 1 and 1/2. The denominator 10 is bigger than the denominator 2 and 1/2. Well, 3/10 sounds bigger. And maybe it does to a child, but they have to have that understanding that as your fraction model is divided into more pieces, the pieces actually become smaller, and this is a great way to model that and to help them come to that understanding. It's not something rote that they should memorize, it's something they should discover. So going back to that, 1/2 is a great reference point. They know that half is the middle. So if we're looking at 3/10, 1, 2, 3, well, if you line that up, it doesn't go to the middle. So 3/10 is certainly not larger than 1/2. And as students are progressing, they could even, conceptualize, well, I have 10 pieces. What's half of 10? Well, that's 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Oh, perfect. Look, it lines up with a half. So it would take 5 of these pieces to be equivalent to one piece down here. Cuisenair rods are an excellent manipulative, and I hope that those of you who teach 3rd grade and beyond will consider using them for fractions.